I used to think abandoned places were only scary because of your imagination. After what happened that night, I don't believe that anymore. This happened about 4 years ago. My best friend David and I had planned a 2-day camping trip in one of the oldest national forests in Montana. We'd gone camping together dozens of times before. We weren't amateurs. We carried maps, first aid kits, extra batteries, everything. The first day went exactly as planned. We spent the afternoon hiking through miles of dense pine forest, stopping every now and then to take pictures. By the time the sun began dropping behind the mountains, we realized we'd underestimated how far we'd come. Our campsite was still nearly 2 hours away. Neither of us wanted to hike unfamiliar trails in complete darkness. That's when David spotted it. Through the trees, standing on top of a rocky hill, was an old fire lookout tower. It was the kind of wooden tower you'd see in old photographs. Tall, weathered, paint peeling from every side. One of its windows was broken. From where we stood, it looked abandoned for years. David smiled. "Looks like we just found our hotel." I laughed. "I just hope it doesn't collapse." The climb up the hill was harder than it looked. The higher we got, the quieter the forest became. At first I didn't notice, then I realized I couldn't hear birds anymore. Even the wind sounded distant. When we finally reached the base of the tower, I looked up. It felt much taller standing underneath it. The wooden staircase wrapped around the outside in long zigzags until it reached the observation room at the top. Some of the steps were cracked. Others leaned slightly under our weight. Each step groaned loudly as we climbed. The sound echoed through the forest. Neither of us spoke much. For some reason, talking felt wrong. When we finally reached the top, the view was incredible. Miles of untouched forest stretched in every direction. The last orange light of sunset painted the trees below. For a few minutes, we forgot how tired we were. The room itself was surprisingly empty. An old wooden desk, a rusted lantern, a chair facing the largest window. Dust covered almost everything. It looked as if nobody had stepped inside for decades, except the chair. It was strangely clean, not polished, just less dusty than everything else. I joked. "Guess the ghosts only clean one chair." David laughed. "Then don't sit in it." Neither of us did. We unpacked our sleeping bags and decided we'd leave at first light. As darkness settled over the forest, the temperature dropped fast. The tower began making small noises, old wood expanding, metal cables creaking. Nothing unusual, at least that's what we kept telling ourselves. Around 9:30 p.m., Ethan lit the old lantern we'd found on the desk. To our surprise, it worked. The warm light filled the room, making it feel almost comfortable. Outside, the forest had become nothing but darkness. You couldn't see the ground anymore, only endless black between the trees. I remember checking my phone. No signal, not even one bar. David looked out the window and quietly said, "You know what's weird?" I asked. "What?" He kept staring into the darkness. "We haven't seen another person all day." I shrugged. "That's kind of the point of camping." He smiled. "Yeah, I guess." For a while we sat in silence, just listening to the lantern hiss softly. Then we heard it. Click. A sound so small I almost ignored it, like the shutter of an old camera. Both of us looked at each other immediately. "Did you hear that?" David nodded. "It came from downstairs." We listened. Nothing, just the lantern, the forest, our breathing. A full minute passed. Then, click. This time it came from directly outside the observation room, not below us, not in the forest. Right outside the wooden door leading to the stairs. David slowly stood up. So, we're definitely not alone. Neither of us laughed. And for the first time that night, I started wishing we'd kept walking instead of climbing that tower. Neither of us moved. We just stared at the wooden door. The lantern hissed softly behind us, then nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, no movement. David finally let out a nervous laugh. Probably a branch. I nodded, even though there weren't any trees close enough to touch the tower. Trying to shake it off, I walked over and slowly opened the door. The staircase outside was empty. My flashlight swept across every step. Nothing. Only darkness disappearing into the forest below. I shut the door and locked it. Not because I believed someone was out there, but because it made me feel better. When I turned back around, David was staring at the desk. What? He didn't answer, he simply pointed. The old lantern was no longer sitting where we'd left it. It had moved, only about a foot. Now it rested perfectly in the center of the desk. Neither of us had touched it. We looked at each other. You moved it? I asked. He slowly shook his head. I thought you did. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then David forced a smile. Maybe the desk isn't level. It wasn't convincing, but it was enough for us to pretend everything was normal. To distract ourselves, we began looking around the room. Old maps were scattered across the shelves. Most had become unreadable with age. In one drawer, I found a small leather notebook. The cover was cracked. The pages smelled damp. Most entries were faded beyond recognition, except the last one, written in darker ink. If you hear the camera, don't answer the door. I frowned. What kind of joke is this? David leaned over my shoulder. Before he could answer, click. The camera shutter again. This time, from inside the room. We both spun around instantly. Nothing. The chair, the lantern, the desk. Everything exactly where it had been, except the notebook. The page I'd been reading had turned by itself. Neither of us had touched it. The next page contained only one sentence. She always knocks 3 times. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Almost immediately, knock. One slow knock echoed through the wooden door. Neither of us breathed. 5 long seconds passed. Knock. The second one sounded harder. The entire room felt smaller. David whispered, "Don't." I already knew what he meant. "Don't open it." Then came the third knock. Not loud, not aggressive, just patient. As if whoever stood outside knew we'd eventually answer. Neither of us moved. The knocking stopped. For almost a full minute, there was nothing. Then something changed. The lantern flame began shrinking, not flickering. Shrinking, until it became no larger than a candle. The corners of the room disappeared into darkness. I reached into my backpack for another flashlight. When I looked back toward the chair, my heart nearly stopped. Someone was sitting in it. I couldn't make out a face. Only the outline of a woman. Long hair, head lowered, completely still. "David." My voice barely came out. He turned toward the chair. His face lost all color. We both stared, unable to move. Then the lantern suddenly flared, brightly, for less than a second. The chair was empty, nothing there, just old wood. David grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. "We're leaving." I nodded immediately. I unlocked the door, pulled it open, and froze. The staircase was still there, but every step was soaking wet. Not from rain. The sky was completely clear. The water slowly dripped from one step to the next, all the way down into darkness. Neither of us had heard rain. Neither of us had carried water upstairs. Yet every single step looked as though someone had just climbed them. Minutes earlier, and whatever had climbed was now standing somewhere inside the tower with us. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the wind. Neither of us looked away from those wet stairs. David was the first to speak. "We're getting out of here." I didn't argue. We stuffed our sleeping bags into our backpacks without even rolling them up properly. I grabbed the lantern by instinct, then immediately put it back. For some reason, I didn't want to touch anything inside that tower anymore. I unlocked the door. The stairs were still wet. Tiny drops continued falling from one step to the next. The strange part? They weren't falling from the sky. They were falling upward, as if the water was climbing toward us instead of running down. Neither of us said a word. We started descending. Every step groaned beneath our weight. The only sound was the old wood creaking beneath our boots. About halfway down, I heard it. Click. The camera shutter. It echoed through the night. I instinctively looked back toward the top of the tower. My blood froze. David was standing in the doorway, perfectly still, watching me. I opened my mouth to call his name. A hand suddenly grabbed my shoulder. I almost screamed. It was David, standing right behind me. "What the hell are you looking at?" he whispered. I couldn't answer. My arm slowly lifted, pointing toward the top. Both of us looked. The doorway was empty. Neither of us spoke again. We practically ran the rest of the way down. The moment our feet touched the ground, a loud slam echoed above us. The tower door had shut by itself. We didn't even look back. We just started walking. Fast. Neither of us cared where the trail was anymore. We just wanted distance between ourselves and that place. I've been camping since I was 13. I've seen bears, coyotes, mountain lions, but nothing prepared me for the one thing I couldn't explain, because nothing ever showed itself. Last October, my friend Ethan and I decided to spend the weekend camping in a national forest a few hours outside town. It wasn't a survival trip. We picked an official campsite beside a small river. The ranger station was almost 6 miles away. The nearest campers were somewhere down the trail. By sunset, the forest looked beautiful. Orange leaves, cold air, a steady breeze moving through the trees. Everything felt peaceful. We cooked dinner, laughed for hours, and finally sat beside the fire watching sparks disappear into the night. Around 11:30 p.m., the wind stopped. Not slowly, instantly. The flames froze almost perfectly upright. The leaves stopped moving, the river still flowed. But the forest itself felt like someone had pressed a mute button on nature. Ethan looked at me. "You feel that?" I nodded. It wasn't quiet, it was empty. No insects, no owls, no rustling branches, nothing. Then, our camp lantern hanging from a tree began to sway, slowly, left, right. The strange part, there was still no wind. I walked over and grabbed it. The metal was ice cold. As soon as I stopped it, something hit the side of our cooler. We both spun around. Nothing, no animal, no footprints. The cooler hadn't fallen over. Something had simply struck it. Ethan laughed nervously. Probably an acorn. There wasn't a single oak tree anywhere near us. Trying to shake it off, we added another log to the fire. The flames suddenly shot almost twice as high. For just a second, they burned deep blue. Not orange, not yellow, blue. Then everything returned to normal. Neither of us said a word. Around midnight, we climbed into our tents. Mine faced the river. His was only a few feet away. I wasn't asleep for more than 20 minutes when I heard fabric stretching. Not my tent. His. Like someone was slowly pressing a hand against the side of it. The sound lasted only a few seconds, then stopped. I whispered, "Ethan." No answer. Then I heard him whisper back, "I'm awake." Neither of us moved. Then something new happened. Not outside, above us. A pine cone landed on my tent. Then another. There were no pine trees above our campsite. The impacts became heavier, not pine cones anymore, small stones. One, every 15 seconds. Never enough to damage the tent, just enough to remind us something was above us. Then, everything stopped. For nearly 5 minutes. Complete silence. I finally convinced myself it was over. That's when my flashlight turned on, by itself. It had been inside my backpack. The beam pointed straight through the mesh window of my tent, toward the river. I slowly looked. At first, nothing. Then I noticed the water. The river wasn't flowing anymore. It looked completely still, like black glass. The current had vanished. Ethan whispered my name. I looked toward his tent. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring into the trees behind my tent. His face had gone completely white. He whispered, "Don't turn around." Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind. Everything inside me wanted to look. I didn't. Instead, I asked, "What do you see?" He didn't answer. Instead, the fire outside suddenly flared back to life, bright enough to light the entire campsite. For just 1 second, I saw dozens of shadows stretching between the trees, not moving, just standing. The fire immediately died again. Darkness. Ethan screamed. I unzipped my tent and ran toward him. His tent was empty, still warm, sleeping bag open, phone on the pillow, shoes still inside. He was gone. I shouted his name until sunrise. Rangers searched the area for 2 days. They found nothing, no footprints, no torn clothing, nothing. Before we left, one of the older rangers walked over to me. He asked one question. "Did the forest go quiet?" I nodded. His expression didn't change. He simply said, "Next time, if the wind stops, leave before the lantern starts moving." Then he walked away. I never found out what he meant. And I never went camping again,